Each year the government releases its annual budget, and each year it's praised and criticised in equal measure. Yesterday's sixth national budget was no exception, but for the average New Zealander it can be hard to see where the benefits really lie. University of Otago politics lecturer Dr Bryce Edwards is here to help explain that. Good evening, Bryce.
Hi, Rebecca.
What are your first impressions of this budget?
Well, it wasn't actually a right-wing National Party budget. It actually looked as if it had been written by Michael Cullen, the last Finance Minister in the Labour government, because it was more directed at traditional Labour concerns of housing, health, education, that sort of area, because it was aimed at the swing voter, really. So I think it was actually quite effective in that sense.
What are the key points of this budget?
Okay, the main one really is the surplus. The government have turned the books around. They were $18 billion in deficit a few years ago. There's a bit of a surplus, pretty thin, and there might be a bit of smoke and mirrors involved there, but it is still a big turnaround. The main other points are about increasing paid parental leave by a few weeks, and similarly the family tax credit related to that. There's been a very small housing initiative, but the big surprise was making doctors' visits free, extending it out from under 6s right to under 13s. And I think that's the one that's most surprised people, because that's more like a traditional Labour Party policy.
How will this budget impact on the average Dunedin household?
Well, these days budgets don't have the big impact that they used to have in the 80s and 90s. They tend to be a bit more milder, so I don't think anyone's going to be waking up with a different lifestyle after this budget, but certainly those free doctor's visits will make a bit of a difference to families, obviously those with new kids, the paid parental leave. But apart from that, no, we're not going to see big changes in Dunedin.
Is there anything in that budget that could drastically change the day-to-day life
of
any residents here?
Not really. I mean, I guess there's two ways of looking at it. That it provides a really solid foundation for the growth in jobs, and this forecasts a 4% growth in the economy next year. Looking at it more from a left-wing perspective, it doesn't really change the inequalities in society, so the poor are still poor, the rich are still rich.
Is it a good budget for National?
Yeah, I think it's really good for them. In terms of, being election year, it really negates some of the concern that some, I think, middle New Zealanders are starting to have about this government maybe being governing for the rich, and issues about, the poor, basically. And this looks like the government's a bit more caring than they were last week.
Can Labour and the other parties get much leverage on this budget?
No, precisely for that, really. It's kind of undercutting those messages from Labour and the Greens, and it's giving them nowhere to go. And so they're kind of complaining, well, National's stealing our policies, but it's not really much of a campaigning message, that one.
How do you think the average Kiwi feels about this budget?
I think by tomorrow, maybe even today, the average Kiwi's not even thinking about this budget. We forget about these budgets quite quickly these days. It wasn't a big, bold budget.
Have you got a prediction for the outcome of the election?
Oh, look, it's still 4.5 months to go. I do think this has tilted things back towards, in favour of National. I think last week I would have put it at 50-50. I'd say now probably a 55% chance of government being re-elected.
Politics lecturer Dr Bryce Edwards, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Rebecca.
After the break on 39 Dunedin News,